Picture yourself entering one of the most extravagant palaces ever constructed. Gleaming corridors, sparkling chandeliers, and abundant silk and satin enough to circle the earth twice. However, take a moment to inhale, and you would be overwhelmed by a stench so unbearable it could make a bouquet of roses wither from a distance. Indeed, welcome to the Grand Palace of Versailles during the 17th century, a place where splendor collided with cruelty, sophistication mingled with filth, and noblewomen, despite their jewels and titles, endured a horrifying lack of hygiene. Today we plunge headfirst, thankfully only figuratively, into the alarmingly filthy lives of aristocratic women at the pinnacle of French royal authority. Here are the 5 most shocking hygiene practices of these noble ladies, and believe me, you are unprepared. A woman born into nobility in 17th century France was expected to embody grace, allure, and impeccable style. Yet, when it came to personal cleanliness, things took a very unpleasant twist. Bathing, which we now link to freshness and health, was often avoided as if it were a deadly pestilence. The science of the era lagged far behind common sense. Physicians insisted that warm water was harmful rather than helpful, claiming it dangerously opened the pores to sickness by inviting invisible dangers lurking in the atmosphere. Compounding this was the strong influence of the Church, which denounced bathhouses as hotbeds of vanity and sin. This led to an entire society gradually turning away from water-based cleanliness rituals. Women did not have the luxury of private bathing spaces, which only worsened the situation. Daily showers were a rare luxury, as people seldom bathed at all. A complete body washing was seen as unnecessary, dangerous, or even immoral. Instead, most aristocrats, including royal ladies, would cleanse their hands, faces, and sometimes their necks using a damp cloth. These cloths were not soaked with plain water, but often dampened with substances like alcohol, vinegar, or even saliva, which was believed to cleanse without overly wetting the skin. Bathing, when it did happen, was a scarce and communal affair. Family members would bathe one after another in the same tub of water. Naturally, men bathed first. By the time it was a woman's turn, the water would be lukewarm, murky, and filled with grime, and occasionally, there might not even be enough water left for her. The impact on royal residences was significant. The odors did not stop at the stables. Visitors often remarked on the overwhelming stench permeating the corridors of Versailles. It was a bizarre blend of stale perfume, sweat, animal grease, and dampness. The nobility certainly cared about their appearances, but their standards of cleanliness were very different, especially for women, who were meant to be exemplars of beauty and elegance. This contradiction was almost tragic, draped in luxurious fabrics, adorned with heavy jewels, and powdered flawlessly, yet beneath it all lay skin untouched by soap for months. This was the true meaning of looking perfect on the outside. Far from impressive when observed closely, the hygiene practices of the past leave much to be desired. If skipping regular bathing was not shocking enough, the absence of modern toilet facilities is something we hardly ever consider today. The Palace of Versailles, an architectural masterpiece filled with opulence and home to Europe's most influential figures, surprisingly lacked sufficient toilets. Despite having hundreds of rooms and hosting thousands of guests, there were barely any adequate bathrooms. Instead, the aristocracy depended on chamber pots, which were small portable containers placed under beds, behind curtains, or inside closets. When nature called, one used the pot, and then either they or someone else emptied its contents by tossing it out the window. If winds were unfavorable or crowds filled the street below, unfortunate pedestrians might receive an unpleasant surprise. Some courtiers even disregarded chamber pots altogether. Men were known to relieve themselves off balconies or in the palace gardens. Visitors and dignitaries from other countries were horrified by what they saw. This was not an occasional problem, but a widespread condition. The palace gained a reputation for a suffocating odor, and hallways were often turned into makeshift lavatories. Imagine a lady gliding through these corridors, carefully lifting her elaborate gown, not only to reveal her embroidery, but also to avoid stepping in human waste. The situation became so intolerable that by the year 1715, a royal order mandated that palace corridors must be cleaned at least once a week. People did not clean themselves daily or after every activity, but rather just once a week, as that was seen as an improvement. Regarding wiping, modern comforts like toilet paper were unavailable. Instead, people used bits of cloth, leaves, straw, or in extreme situations, their own hands. Washing afterward was minimal or sometimes neglected altogether. When the method of waste disposal was simply throwing it out a window and the way of cleaning was, at best, questionable, it is no surprise that parasites and diseases spread widely. If Versailles symbolized Europe's obsession with fashion, its fiercest expression was visible in the wigs and hairstyles of noblewomen. These were not ordinary hairdos, but imaginative constructions standing several feet tall, decorated with ribbons, pearls, tiny gardens, and even small ships. Yes, miniature ships were perched atop powdered curls, appearing to sail the waves. To build such elaborate shapes, women filled their hair with all kinds of supports like wire frameworks, horsehair, and padding made from wool or cotton. After shaping the hair, they coated it liberally with pomade made from animal fat, primarily beef tallow, to shape and hold the style firmly in place. However, this greasy substance created a warm, sticky environment that was perfect for lice, especially since women rarely washed their hair and almost never took off their ornate wigs for routine cleaning. Infestations of lice were not just frequent, but expected, with large colonies thriving within those intricate creations. The grand fashion statements favored by ladies of the court involved unique accessories called lice claws, with long handles made of silver. These tools allowed them to gently scratch their itchy scalps without damaging their polished looks. These claws were not only practical but also exquisitely decorated, often seen at dinners or social gatherings, where a woman might discreetly pause between sips of wine to ease her discomfort. Despite the irritation caused by lice, no one dared to skip this fashion ritual. In the strict social order of court life, appearance was closely tied to influence and power. To appear unfashionable or inadequately dressed meant risking one's rank and respect. Even if one's scalp was infested and hair greasy with old oils, the performance had to continue undisturbed. Wigs added another layer of difficulty as they were more than uncomfortable and unhygienic. They carried real dangers. Some were so heavy that they led to persistent neck pain, while others easily ignited from nearby candle flames. Yet wearing these wigs was the cost of holding on to privilege at court. Poor women faced no such constraints. Many simply shaved their heads to prevent lice infestations completely. However, for noblewomen, their hair symbolized power and status, even if it concealed a thriving colony of pests beneath its strands. Shifting now to a subject that ought to bring pleasure. Food. Royal banquets were famous for their extravagance, tables overflowing with meat pies, pastries, roasted fowl, and candied fruits. But behind this lavish display simmered a troubling reality. The palace kitchens themselves were far from immune to the larger sanitation problems plaguing the palace. In fact, these very kitchens often bore the brunt of the poor plumbing and hygiene conditions at Versailles. The conditions were so dreadful that raw sewage would occasionally overflow into the cooking areas. It has been documented that on at least one occasion wastewater even reached Queen Marie Antoinette's private kitchen, causing a devastating impact on food safety. Without adequate refrigeration, ventilation, or proper waste disposal, contamination was widespread. Meat spoiled rapidly, and fruits and vegetables were often left exposed for days. Pests wandered freely, yet the cooks had no alternative but to continue serving potentially dangerous meals to the highest social classes. As a result, gastrointestinal illnesses were widespread. Symptoms like diarrhea, vomiting, and infections were common among those who ate these contaminated foods. The worst affliction was parasite infections. Royal courtiers frequently suffered from intestinal worms, especially tapeworms, due to undercooked meat and filthy kitchen environments. Even the powerful King Louis XIV was not exempt. It is reported that he once passed a tapeworm measuring 6 inches long, a grim indication that no one, regardless of status, was immune to the consequences of poor hygiene. For the women of the court, dining was a delicate act requiring grace, conversation, flirtation, toasting, and entertainment. However, beneath this refined exterior, many struggled silently with nausea, cramps, and more severe illnesses, all to preserve appearances. Finally, we reach what was perhaps the most personal and agonizing experience for a woman childbirth. For royal women, this was not only painful, but also a very public event. In 17th century France, when a queen or a high-ranking noblewoman gave birth, it was a matter of great importance and intense observation. When a woman went into labor, it was regarded as a national occasion. The delivery room would be crowded with courtiers, physicians, priests, and noble spectators, all present to observe. They were not there to help or provide comfort, but simply to watch. When Queen Marie Thérèse gave birth, the chamber was so cramped it felt more like a theater than a medical space. The reason for this was that royal births needed to be witnessed openly to avoid any scandals. People feared that a stillborn or a daughter might be quietly replaced with a healthy male heir. Therefore, the entire birthing process had to take place under full observation. This meant that the mother, likely in tremendous pain and emotional turmoil, was surrounded by an audience during one of her most vulnerable moments. There was no privacy, no respect for her dignity, only the weight of expectation. Marie Antoinette famously lost consciousness after giving birth due to the stifling heat and the overwhelming crowd present in her room. She was not alone in this experience. Many women fainted, wept, or faced severe complications while being treated as if they were actors performing on stage. Childbirth was highly dangerous at the time because of limited medical knowledge and the absence of antibiotics. 1 out of every 3 children died before reaching 3 years old. Mothers also faced a high risk of death, particularly due to infections caused by unclean hands and non-sterile instruments. Consequently, although royal births were celebrated as national triumphs, they were also occasions filled with tremendous fear and physical agony. The emotional burden on women who had to give birth under constant scrutiny, pressure, and threat was overwhelmingly harsh. Here it is, 5 unsettling realities from the shining corridors of royalty. Behind the sparkling dresses, scented chambers soaked in perfume, and dazzling crowns, noble women endured lives full of hardship, humiliation, and perils that would make today's readers uncomfortable. They showed elegance and poise publicly, yet in private they scratched, suffered, and endured in ways history frequently overlooks. If you believed royal existence consisted only of glamorous gowns and lavish feasts, think again. The truth is far messier and much more relatable. Until we meet again, continue delving into history, because it is not only captivating but sometimes downright messy.